I never thought I would find myself in this situation. 12 years of marriage, a shared past, memories, a cozy home filled with familiar things. It seemed like we had everything: stability, understanding, even love, or so I thought. Mark had always been a caring husband. He worked hard but made time for the family. He never missed birthdays, brought me coffee in the mornings, asked how my day was. Everything was right, calm. And maybe too calm. The first thing that made me suspicious was his attitude toward his phone. He had never hidden it before, but now, whenever I entered the room, he would put it in his pocket or turn its screen down. A small thing, but I noticed. Then came the late nights at work. Urgent matters, new projects, lots of responsibilities, he said. I believed him. Shouldn't I? But one night, I woke up and realized he wasn't in bed. I walked into the living room and found him texting. He quickly locked the screen, but I had already seen enough. I miss you. Who was he writing to? He looked up, startled to see me standing in the doorway. You're awake? His voice was calm. Too calm. Who are you texting? For a moment, confusion flickered in his eyes, but he quickly regained composure. Work stuff. I didn't argue. I just turned and went back to bed. But from that night on, everything felt different.
I didn't confront him, didn't check his phone, but I started watching. He began paying more attention to his appearance, spending longer in the bathroom, wearing that shirt he used to hate. Even his scent changed. A new cologne, one that I had never given him. Then came the weekend. Sunday, our usual family day. But this time he said he had an urgent meeting. On a Sunday? I asked. Yes, it's important. I won't be long. But he didn't know I was following him. I kept my distance as I drove, my heart pounding so loudly it felt like it might burst. He parked near a cafe and walked inside. A minute later, I saw her. Young, long hair, elegant, confident. She sat across from him, and he smiled at her in a way he hadn't smiled at me in years. I didn't go inside. I just turned around and drove home. That night, I didn't sleep. The image of Mark sitting across from her, his eyes full of something I hadn't seen in years, burned into my mind. My heart felt like it had been ripped apart, but I refused to cry. Not yet. Morning came, and Mark acted like nothing had happened. He kissed me on the cheek, told me he'd be home early and left for work. I stood there in the kitchen, gripping my coffee mug so tightly my knuckles turned white. How long had this been going on? Who was she to him? And most importantly, what was I going to do now? I decided I needed proof. Real proof. Not just suspicions. I spent the entire day in a fog, barely functioning, but the plan in my head was clear. That evening, when Mark came home, I acted normal. I smiled. I laughed at his jokes. I even kissed him goodnight like nothing was wrong. The next morning, as soon as he left, I went through his things. I had never done this before, never felt the need. But now I needed answers. His laptop was password protected, but his desk drawer wasn't. Inside, I found receipts. Expensive dinners, hotel bookings, gifts. None of them for me. My hands trembled as I pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet. Not my style. Not for me. I felt sick. I had to know more. So I did something I never imagined myself doing. I hired a private investigator. A man named Daniel. He wasn't cheap, but he was good. He assured me I'd have answers within a week. And he was right. 3 days later, I got the call. We have photos. He's been meeting her regularly. Same cafe. Sometimes a hotel downtown. If you want to see. I do. I met Daniel in his small office, my heart pounding. He slid a folder across the desk. My hands were ice cold as I opened it. There was my husband. Holding her hand. Kissing her. Looking at her the way he used to look at me. Something inside me shattered. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at the truth I had suspected but hadn't wanted to believe. The man I had built a life with had been lying to me for God knows how long. What now? Daniel asked gently. I closed the folder and stood up. Now, I make sure he knows exactly what he's losing.
That evening, I prepared everything carefully. I made his favorite dinner, roast chicken with garlic butter, mashed potatoes, and a glass of red wine. I set the table, lit candles. I even wore the dress he once said was his favorite. When Mark walked in, he looked surprised. "Wow, what's the occasion?" I smiled. "Just wanted to do something nice for my husband." "Sit down. Eat." He did. He ate. He talked about work, about how stressful his week had been. And I sat there, nodding, listening, waiting. And then, when he was halfway through his second glass of wine, I pulled out the folder and placed it on the table between us. His face paled instantly. "What's this?" "Open it." He hesitated, but he did. The moment he saw the pictures, he stiffened. His hand trembled slightly as he flipped through them. Then he looked up at me. "It's not." "Don't." My voice was calm. Too calm. "Don't insult me by lying any more than you already have. Just tell me the truth." He exhaled shakily, running a hand through his hair. "I never meant for this to happen." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, really? So you just tripped and fell into a hotel room with her?" He swallowed hard. "It was a mistake." "How long?" I asked coldly. 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of deception. But betrayal. "Do you love her?" The question came out before I could stop it. His silence was deafening. Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "I see. Please, He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Don't touch me." He looked desperate now. "I don't want to lose you. It was a mistake. I love you. I swear, I'll end it. Just, please, give me a chance to fix this." I stared at him, the man I had once trusted with everything. The man who had chosen someone else over me. "You already had a chance, Mark. You threw it away." He tried again. "We can go to therapy. We can fix this." "No, Mark. You can't fix something you destroyed." Silence. I stood up, taking a deep breath. "I'm done. I deserve better than this." His eyes filled with regret, with panic. "Please don't do this." But it was already done. A week later, I filed for divorce. And just like that, 12 years of marriage ended with a signature on a piece of paper. Not with screaming, not with violence. Just with quiet acceptance that sometimes love isn't enough. And as I walked out of that courtroom, for the first time in months, I felt free. The house was silent when Mark returned that night. I was sitting at the kitchen table, a cold cup of tea in front of me. I had thought about this moment all day, rehearsing what I would say, but now that he was here, the words felt stuck in my throat. He set his keys down and looked at me. "Hey, you're up late." I studied his face. There was no guilt, no nervousness. Just that same calm expression he always wore. "How was your meeting?" I asked, my voice steady. Something flickered in his eyes for a fraction of a second. "Fine. Just a lot of discussions." "On a Sunday?" He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I already told you it was important." I nodded, taking a slow sip of my tea. "Mark," I began carefully. "Who is she?" His whole body tensed. "What are you talking about?" I stood up and leaned against the counter. "I followed you today. I saw you with her." The silence between us stretched unbearably long. He didn't deny it. Didn't try to come up with a lie. Instead, he let out a deep sigh and sat down at the table, rubbing his face. "It's not what you think," he finally said. I felt something inside me crack. "Then tell me what it is." He hesitated, his fingers tapping against the wooden surface. "Her name is Olivia. She's just someone I met through work." "Just someone?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "Mark, I saw the way you looked at her." He looked away, guilt finally creeping into his expression. "I never meant for it to happen like this." My stomach twisted. So it did happen. Silence. That was all the confirmation I needed. The weight of his confession settled over me like a heavy fog. I had prepared myself for lies, for half-truths, but not for this quiet, unspoken admittance. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and with just one step, everything I had known would shatter beneath me. "How long?" I asked finally. Mark ran a hand down his face, his eyes avoiding mine. A few months. Months. Not days, not weeks, since. I let out a shaky breath. Do you love her? His hesitation was the longest pause yet. I don't know, he admitted. It's different with her. She makes me feel alive. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. And I don't. His eyes snapped to mine, full of regret. It's not about you, it never was. I never stopped loving you, but somewhere along the way, things just became routine. Predictable. I let out a bitter laugh. So what now, Mark? You get to have your excitement while I sit here and pretend our marriage isn't falling apart. He looked lost, like a man drowning in a sea of his own mistakes. I don't know what I want, he admitted. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did, I said, my voice breaking. And you kept doing it. The truth was, I had already lost him long before I followed him to that cafe. Maybe I had just refused to see it. Mark reached out as if to touch my hand, but I pulled away. I need time, I whispered. I can't fix this overnight, and neither can you. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Fear of losing everything we had built. That night, I slept in the guest room. And for the first time in 12 years, I realized that our home no longer felt like home.